Hello, everyone. I'm Robyn Grable, the founder of Talents Ascend and the Ascend Collective, and your host for Ascending Beyond Barriers. Welcome. Ascending Beyond Barriers is an inspiring podcast dedicated to showcasing the remarkable journeys of small business founders who have faced and overcome significant challenges on their path to success. Each episode delves into the personal stories of entrepreneurs from diverse backgrounds, highlighting their unique experiences, struggles, and triumphs. Today, we're honored to have Dave Wan on the show with us. I'm so excited. Dave is a TEDx speaker, certified money coach, and the founder and CEO of Dave Wan & Co. He has been recognized as a global top 30 subject matter expert by the Outlier Project. From conferences and summits to the corporate workplace, Dave has been empowering sales teams to transform their money mindset and turn their money blocks into confident, value-driven conversations that unlock higher value deals and deeper client relationships. He's a former Air Force captain with a decorated military career and has been featured by TEDx, ABC, EBN, Sway Live, Military Media, and the Air Force. Dave, welcome. So grateful that you're here. I'm just so excited about this conversation because when we met through Warrior Rising, I totally resonated with what you focus on. So thank you for being here. I'm excited about this conversation.
Hey, Robyn, thanks for the kind introduction. And I am super pumped to be here as well. So I'm looking forward to our chat and let's see where it goes.
Yeah. So jumping in, I mean, money, the conversation that we had that you talked to us about through Warrior Rising was about how we think about money from our past experience. And for me, it absolutely resonated because I grew up in a split family. I had a stepfather, stepmother, all those things. And money was always chaotic. There was never enough of it. I mean, I was born in 61. So just that whole childhood and through the 60s and 70s, just never enough money. And I think that instilled in me that money means chaos and there's never going to be enough. And I'm always going to struggle with it. So I find myself like sabotaging my life and living in that chaos because that's what I was used to. So talk to us about, kind of how you started on this journey of helping people finance. And now that you've transitioned into really building sales teams by looking at their money mindset. So how did you get into this?
That's a really great question. And it's actually like one of the top questions that I get is how did you stumble upon this?
Yeah.
And it honestly had to do with all the pain that I was experiencing back in 2016. And in my TED Talk, I opened up by talking about the panic attack that happened right after I bought my house. And so I was a captain in the Air Force, living in Colorado, about to teach at the Air Force Academy, which is my dream job. And then all of a sudden, like all these emotional chaos and turmoil started to come up to the surface. And it was painful. I went through months and months of back-to-back panic attacks constantly. Never been through something like that before. And that's what really opened up to like why I was feeling that way. And I went through like a 6-year journey of trying to figure that out. And wow. I had no professional help. There's not a lot of people that really understand it. So I had to like just dig deep and understand like why I experienced that thing in my life. And so, I mean, it all had to do with the extreme amount of pain that I was experiencing and digging into it and kind of connecting the dots and seeing why I was doing what I did.
Yeah. I mean, it makes sense. I mean, you shared, when I heard you speak and resonated with what you talked about your childhood and how you grew up and where those money issues stem from. And a lot of people just don't understand, even not necessarily just with money, but anything from our past or our history can take us in the direction of not being successful or sabotaging our success or just in more ways than that. So how do you help now sales teams? How do you help them think about how they change that?
I think it's really important to be able to uh, first be aware of the
Mm.
habits, patterns, and behaviors that are actually causing you to self-sabotage or make, you know, bad decisions
Bad
over and over and
decisions.
over again. So I think it's really important to first, at a high level, like, okay, what are my actions?
Yeah.
I continuously, whenever I meet with clients, I lead the conversation with discounting. Why? Why does that keep happening? Or, let's take it to the personal finance arena. I know I need to spend less than I make, but I
Right.
constantly spend more, and my credit card debt continues to rise.
Yeah.
Uh, the credit card debt is like at its highest right now. I think it's at 1.2 trillion
Oh,
across in the whole country. So there are like things we do on a daily basis, and if it's something that we don't want to do, or it
mm,
doesn't help us reach some of the goals that we have in our lives, I think it's really important to understand why that behavior and that pattern and that habit is actually happening in the first place. So first
yeah.
step is awareness and understanding that, and then that's like that's not the game, but that's like half the game. So that's like half the battle. So you have to understand that first.
And I mean, that's any disruption that you have, you've got to figure out and admit that you're doing it. Like alcohol problems, drug problems, any of those things that are sabotaging your life or creating barriers in your life, you have to first admit that they're there. You're doing something about it. I follow
Right.
another great David Meltzer, and he says, "What are you doing to interfere with your success?" And really identify those things. Sorry, I cut you off. What were you going to say?
No, you used the word admit. I used the word acknowledge.
Yep.
It's both, and it's the same thing. But you have to be able to first be aware of it, and then actually acknowledge that it's happening.
Yeah.
Because
And
if you
for
ignore
me,
it,
like I know. Oh, go ahead.
then you're going to
Yeah.
continue to be on the same trajectory.
Absolutely. Well, it's the same. It's like if you continue to do the same thing over and over again and expecting different results, you're never going to get there. But for me, it was like I knew I all this chaos in my mind from money and my childhood and my history. And I would use, I'd overshop when I was depressed or something. I would just go out and shop, knowing that when I got the credit card bill that I couldn't pay it, and I would have be more depressed at that point. But not realizing why I was doing that. It took me a while to realize why I was doing that and where that stemmed from. So I mean, how do you get, you probably don't have a lot of time to work with these sales teams. How do you get them to acknowledge that? And probably a lot of business owners out there, especially small business owners, face these same barriers to their success. How do you get them to acknowledge, like, how do you first, like, what are the steps to kind of get them to acknowledge and say, oh, have that aha moment? Yeah, I'm doing that.
Yeah, so the work that I do is not one-on-one work. It's more team-based work. And
Okay.
so individuals within the team are going to be on their own timeline, and they're going to be on their own journey. Uh,
Mm, yeah, sure.
uprooting and changing behavior is can take a very long time for some folks, and
And it's
for others,
personal, right?
and
Yeah.
it's very personal. And for other folks, it may take, I don't know, 24 hours or immediately, whatever it might be, right? But my job is to actually bring that level of awareness to the table, give them different frameworks that I put together. A framework that I put together is called AHA, right? AHHA. And so the first
Okay.
A is awareness. The second H is history. So it's more of a, not an acronym, but a mnemonic. But H is history. So you got to dig into your history and
Hmm.
understand where that negative pattern, habit, and behavior is coming from.
Yeah.
And guess what? If I'm not a neurologist or whatnot, but I have a basic understanding of how the brain works and the three components of our brain. And if you understand that our primal brain is formed from right when we were born, and the logical side of our brain is actually not fully formed until we're about 25. There's
Yeah.
a lot of things happening in the first 7 to 12 years of our lives,
Yeah.
And the brain just fires different neurons and it just becomes hardwired over time. And that
Yeah.
hardwired results in different patterns that you have that are subconsciously driven. So you have to be able to understand that and dig deep into your story. And I think understanding your story, which is what I had to do, and
Yeah.
deconstructing it and really pulling it apart, um, is it. So
Yeah.
I take that. Everything in sales has to do with money. So I work on the money aspect first, and then I have uh, the sales professionals. Like my next step is connecting the dots. So I have a
Okay.
diagnosis on like what their archetype and patterns are like, but then I have them connect the dots, which means they have to dig into their own like sales career and dig into like past opportunities that went right and went wrong and deconstructing that and then be able
Yeah.
to pull apart what did go wrong and then replacing those things with better habits so that way they can show up with full focus, authenticity, confidence, and energy when interacting with clients. So
Yeah.
there's a phase that I go through, and in that workshop, people might change right away, but
Yeah.
others, they may not. But what I try to equip
Absolutely.
them with is if you run into a situation in the future where there's a little bit of friction going on in your heart, and you're like, "Ah, man, I really want to, I don't know about closing this deal, or I don't know about chasing after some opportunities. It's a little bit scary for me." That's a little bit of friction. That's your body's telling you something. And
Right.
so once that happens, the awareness starts to kick in, and hopefully they could actually, get better and better and better. So, yeah.
Yeah. So I think we hit, you had the first A and the H. What's the other end part? I missed it.
All right. The second H is heal.
Okay.
So you have to heal, or another word is repair, whatever
Yeah.
that rupture or that whatever is broken,
Yeah.
right? So if there's
Yeah.
something, if there's a negative root, you have to be able to like uproot that. That's the healing part, right? You have to uproot it, and part of it is, for me, the biggest component to accomplishing that is actually forgiveness.
Mm.
Um, so forgiveness is huge, and then being able to like do some somatic healing to where your body is calm, and then
Yeah.
you're not in flight or fight mode, but you're activating the logical side of your brain, right? And
Yeah.
so when you're taking care of yourself emotionally, physically, spiritually, mentally, um, the chance of the logical side of your brain, the prefrontal cortex, kicking on is much higher when things are calm, right? And
Yeah.
so there's like different things that I do for the healing, and then the last A is action,
Nice.
which
Okay.
is where everybody starts nowadays. They
True.
start in step 4. I believe you need to start in step 1. So everybody
Absolutely.
starts in step 4, which is why people are super excited about the logical stuff, which is or the practical stuff, which is totally understandable. But people keep re-entering the hamster
Yep.
wheel over and over again, even though they think they stepped off of it. So yeah.
Well, and the awareness part and the healing part, those are hard parts to go through. Especially if you're going to rewrite your history and re-record, the memory tape in your brain. I mean that it can be painful to go through that. So most people skip that and say, "Nope, I'm just going to take a new action." But technically, they're really not taking new action. They're just maybe taking a different action in a different way, but it's not really different because they're still in their head the same. So, I mean, I'm saying this and I'm totally talking about myself. So,
Yeah.
but I'm sure there are people out there that resonate with it as well. But I really, I mean, I've always been through plenty of therapy in my life, but I've always known my childhood has made me who I am and some of the issues that I have. And I'm grateful for what I've gone through my childhood and even through my time in the Navy and etc. But I never really associated it with money. And when I heard you talk, I was like, oh my gosh, it makes so much sense why I've lived in like this chaotic state of, never having enough money or always overspending, because that's just what we did. And that's just how I learned about money. I mean, my stepfather was so hardcore about every penny that my mother would spend. She literally would have to go to the grocery and write down everything that she spent to the penny to account to him when she got home. And I remember that, and just all those things. So, wow, just amazing. Well, I want to switch gears because I'm sure there's a lot of people out there who would love to be a TEDx speaker. Tell us about that experience.
It was, funny enough, it's, it was a year ago this past Sunday. So
I saw your
February,
post.
February 16, I think, or something like that was the date that I had my TEDx talk. I've wanted to do a TED talk for several years now. Just the thought of it really scared me because it is like the world's like most recognizable brand when it comes
Big
to
state.
speaking, right?
Yeah.
And so it was scary for me to think about that, but you know what? I just kept like pushing myself, and um, yeah, it was awesome. It was the most intense preparation that I've ever done for anything. I
I
spent
bet.
about 80 hours a week for 3 months in
Wow.
preparation for my speech. Uh,
Oh my
so,
God.
so I'm sure you've seen it, but like that was the
Hmm.
final product of me working on that. In addition to raising kids and family and a full time job, right? So my business.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, it was awesome. Um, I think there's no better way to go from little league baseball to college baseball like that, right? I think it's the best way
Okay.
to actually elevate and level up very, very quickly. And so I felt like,
Okay.
like I'm not going to just like slow roll this. I'm going to try to go to the big leagues. And so that's why I applied, and it was a very competitive process. But fortunately, my
I
story
bet.
stuck out, and they were able to see that. So yeah, it was really good.
It's a great story. So what would your advice be for somebody who wants to be on that stage? What would you tell them, how to prepare, how to make that happen?
Yeah, that's a good question. So if you go to TED.com, so I think there's multiple ways of actually getting selected to speak. One is if you're like a pretty well-known figurehead, you're probably going to get a phone call and you'll get invited. Um,
Sure.
and internally, if you know some people, I'm sure that there's ways to select people. I probably went the hardest route, which is I applied straight up. And so if you go to TED.com, there's like a drop down menu of like TEDx events across the country, and you can
Mm,
filter by the calendar year that the event is gonna be held, and
okay.
there's gonna be a map, and there's gonna be a bunch of stuff that pops up. And if I were you, if you're interested in doing a TED Talk, I would just start applying or just clicking on those links and just start doing some research on like whether there's like a public application, and submitting. There's like different restrictions on whether you can or cannot do things. One of them is like
Mm,
local restrictions. So if you're not in that local area, you're not qualified to speak there.
wow.
That's
Interesting.
not the
Okay.
case for every one of them. That's not the case for every one of them, but there are some restrictions on some of these. And yeah, I mean, you have different time limits. Different. Uh, some places want you to do it in 8 minutes. Some place you can't go more than 18 minutes. So anything in between there is what the rules are. But if you have a unique story and you were able to solve a problem, pretty much that's like
Mm.
your problem, um, and you think the world would benefit from hearing your message, I would highly encourage people to do it.
How has it changed your business, your life, after having been on it a year ago?
You know, I'm going to be a little vulnerable here. I thought I had a very unhealthy view of I had a very unhealthy expectations of the TED Talk. So
Okay.
I've seen people, their lives have been upended, like completely changed because of TED Talks.
Okay.
I was hoping that my life would go in that trajectory. Um, and what I've noticed is that a TED Talk is not the make or break. It's just another step in the road,
Yeah.
right? And
Yeah.
so um, it's another notch in your belt. It's
Yeah.
another thing that you could put in your bio when somebody introduces you. But it is not my identity.
Yeah.
It is not my
Well, very
identity.
much like what you teach, right? There's different tools for what you have available to make you successful. And this TED Talk was just one of those things, like you said, in your tool belt that you can be recognized for. But
Yes,
yeah,
but
I mean, it gives you some credibility, of course, right?
yeah, I think the credibility really helps. So whenever I go around and people know me as that, the doors
Yeah.
are open. They'll listen a little longer. Things like that. So I think that's where it helps. But other than that, like I honestly don't see myself as one or think of myself as a TED speaker like all the time. Like
Mm.
I just don't do that. But I thought it was going to be my identity, and then I had a kind of identity crisis last year after my TED talk, and I had to like really reevaluate some things. But yeah, it's it's a notch in the belt. It's a step in the road. It's not the make or break.
But I think there's an important lesson in there, if in my viewpoint, that sometimes we do try to put so many eggs in one basket, thinking that that's going to be, hey, I'm going to go after this group of clients because they're going to just explode my business, and I'm going to just put all my eggs in this basket. Doesn't turn out to be that. So I think a lot of people try to focus too hard on one thing, and then they get disappointed, or they get like, wow, what happened, or why didn't that work? And instead of really kind of focusing, and probably it sounds like, and from our conversation before we started recording, that may have helped you pivot how you've kind of transformed your business today. So I think those are good things. I believe everything happens for a reason. That we're all put where we're supposed to be to learn lessons and be able to go forward with things. So, all right. So in our closing couple of minutes here, just give us your best advice for entrepreneurs that want to start their own business. What challenges do you think they'll face, and how would they overcome those?
My answer is going to shock you. Just kidding. But I truly believe that. I mean, for entrepreneurs out there, there's like so many different. Here's the steps you need to take. You need to be
Mhm.
marketing yourself this way. You need to be able to manage your money this way. You need to be able to set up your website like this, set up lead magnets, and here's the email. Just a bunch of different steps, right?
Yeah.
Practical steps that you can take. I'm still a huge believer that your relationship with money and the deep underlying emotions that come with it are actually going to drive the entire show. So until you
Yeah.
figure that out, until you
Yeah.
understand it and work through it, it's going to become a subconscious challenge in your business.
Yeah.
Um,
Wow.
if people continue to wonder why they keep shooting themselves in the foot and like tripping over themselves, or like the title of the talk that I had with Warrior Rising was, you need to get out of your own way. And a lot of the
Right.
things that you do are actually causing you to fail. It's not anything external, but it's mostly internal, right? And
Yeah.
so if these barriers are there and whatnot, I think it's really important to identify that. And a lot of people could do it by digging into their money stuff.
Yeah. Absolutely. And going through their awareness, their history, their healing, and taking action. Yes, I
Yep.
love that. That's awesome. All right, Dave. Well, thank you so much for sharing your story and sharing your journey. We really appreciate you being on with us today and love. I mean, you've helped me tremendously just in that one conversation that I heard you talk and just following you now. So thank you so much. I'm sure there are others that you've helped out there and will continue to help. So, but I appreciate you. So thank you.
Thank you for having me, and I really enjoyed today's talk.